I'm Helen Grace Whitmore, though most folks just call me Helen. I'm 73 years old, been a teacher for 42 years, and I've got a story that might just touch your heart the way it changed mine. You know, people always ask me what the most important lesson I ever learned was. They expect me to talk about something from my teaching days, or maybe something profound from Scripture. But the truth is, the most valuable lesson came to me at 70 years old. Sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, reading a text message that broke my heart and set me free all at the same time. But let me start from the beginning, because every story worth telling has roots that go deep. One married my Samuel when I was 22. He was a good man, worked hard at the lumber mill, never missed church on Sunday, and loved me in that quiet, steady way that some folks never get to experience. We had 2 children, David, our oldest, and Sarah, who came along 3 years later. Samuel passed on 8 years ago now, heart attack right there in his garden. He was tending to his tomatoes when the Lord called him home. I still plant tomatoes every spring, you know. Can't seem to help myself. After Samuel died, I threw myself into being the best grandmother I could be. David had married Emma, a sweet girl from the next town over, and they had given me 2 beautiful grandbabies, little Michael, who's now 12, and sweet Lucy, who just turned 9. Sarah moved to California after college and calls every Sunday, but David and his family, they stayed right here in town. I thought we were close. I really did. Now, I've always been a woman of faith. My mama raised me in the church, and I've never strayed from that path. Every night, before I lay my head down on that pillow, I fold my hands and talk to the Lord. And for the longest time, my prayer was always the same. Lord, keep my family together. Grant us a sacred moment to share, all of us together. I had this dream, you see, of taking my whole family on a beach vacation, somewhere peaceful, where we could just be together, make memories, and feel your presence in the vastness of your creation. I'd heard about this place called Eden Bay from my friend Margaret at church. She'd gone there with her daughter's family the summer before and came back just glowing with joy. She showed me pictures of the most beautiful coastline you ever did see, white sand beaches that stretched for miles, crystal blue water that looked like it came straight from heaven, and sunsets that would make you weep with their beauty. Helen, she said, it's the kind of place where you can hear God whispering in the waves. That's when I got the idea. I was going to take my family to Eden Bay. Now, on a retired teacher's pension, a vacation like that wasn't going to be easy to afford. But I'd learned a thing or two about determination over the years. I went to the old mason jar that Samuel used to keep his fishing money in, cleaned it out real good, and wrote Sacred Dream Fund on a piece of masking tape. Every single day, I put something in that jar. Sometimes it was just the change from my grocery trip. Other times, when I'd had a good week with my evening English tutoring sessions, I could put in a $5 or even a $10 bill. I cut back on everything I could think of. Instead of buying the good coffee at the store, I bought the store brand. I stopped getting my hair done at the salon and learned to trim it myself. I darned socks that most people would have thrown away. When the church ladies would go out for lunch after service, I'd make my excuses and go home to eat a peanut butter sandwich. Every sacrifice felt like a prayer. Every penny saved was another step closer to bringing my family together in that beautiful place. The evening tutoring sessions were the hardest part. I'd already put in a full day of work. Even though I was officially retired, I still substituted at the elementary school 3 days a week, but after dinner, I'd set up my little teaching station at the kitchen table. I helped adults studying for their citizenship tests, high school kids struggling with grammar, and anyone else who needed help with English. Some nights I'd work until 10 or 11 o'clock, my eyes burning from the strain, my hand cramped from correcting papers. But every time I felt like giving up, I'd look at that mason jar sitting on my windowsill and remember why I was doing it. Samuel's picture sat right next to that jar. Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, I'd talk to him about my plan. Sam, I'd whisper, I think this is what we're supposed to do. Bring everyone together, somewhere beautiful, somewhere we can all feel blessed. I swear I could feel him nodding in approval. For 3 long years, I saved 3 years of small sacrifices, extra work, and careful planning. I researched Eden Bay like I was writing a dissertation. I found the perfect cottage rental, big enough for all of us, right on the beach, with a wraparound porch where we could sit and watch the sunrise together. I imagined David and Emma bringing the kids, maybe Sarah flying in from California. I pictured us all gathered around a big table for dinner, saying grace, while the ocean waves provided our hymn. I could see little Michael and Lucy building sandcastles, while the adults shared stories and laughter. When I finally had enough money saved up, I was so excited I could barely contain myself. I called David first, since they lived closest and I saw them most often. "David, honey," I said, barely able to keep the joy out of my voice, "I have something wonderful to tell you. I've been saving up for something special, and I'd like to take the whole family on a vacation to Eden Bay. It's going to be absolutely beautiful, and we can all be together for a whole week." There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's really generous, Mom. When were you thinking?" "We settled on the first week of July. I booked the cottage that very day, putting down the deposit with hands that shook from excitement. I called Sarah in California, and she was thrilled. She immediately started looking at flights and asking what she could bring to help out. For the next few months, I threw myself into planning. I made lists of activities we could do together, researched the best restaurants for family dinners, even bought a new camera so I could capture every precious moment. I started shopping for the trip early, picking up beach toys for the grandkids, a new sundress for myself, and a cooler big enough to pack lunches for our beach days. The closer we got to July, the more excited I became. I started each day with a prayer of thanksgiving, thanking God for making this dream possible. I'd lie in bed at night, imagining all of us together, and feel such peace and joy that I could barely sleep. 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave, I called David to go over the final details. I wanted to make sure everyone had everything they needed, coordinate who was bringing what, and just share in the excitement together. "Oh, about the trip, Mom," David said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that. What is it, honey?" "Well, Emma's been thinking, and she feels like it might be better if it was just our immediate family this time. You know, just me, her, and the kids. She thinks it would be more relaxing that way." I felt like someone had knocked the wind right out of me. "But David, this was supposed to be for all of us. I've been planning this for 3 years. I've been saving in—" "I know, Mom, and we really appreciate it. The money you put in can still cover our part of the cottage. But Emma thinks it would be too stressful trying to coordinate everyone's needs, and the kids might enjoy it more if it's just us." "What about Sarah? She's already bought her plane ticket. She can still come visit us here some other time." "Look, Mom, you've been working so hard lately with all that tutoring and substitute teaching. Maybe this is a sign that you should just rest. Take some time for yourself." After I hung up the phone, I sat in my kitchen for the longest time. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floor, and I felt more alone than I had since Samuel died. That mason jar sat on the windowsill, catching the last rays of sunlight, and I realized that all those prayers, all those sacrifices, all those dreams had been for nothing. But you know what? Sometimes the Lord has a way of speaking to us in our darkest moments. I picked up my Bible, the same one my mama had given me when I got married, and it fell open to Matthew 7-6. "Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet, and turn and tear you to pieces." Now, I'm not calling my son and his wife pigs, you understand. But sitting there in that kitchen, I realized that I had been casting my pearls before people who couldn't see their value. My love, my sacrifice, my dreams of bringing the family together, these were sacred things. And I had been offering them to people who saw them as burdens rather than blessings. I got down on my knees right there on that kitchen floor and prayed like I hadn't prayed in years. "Lord," I said, "give me the strength to forgive those who don't appreciate mercy, but also give me the wisdom to protect myself. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but alongside it was something else, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, I called the cottage rental company and explained the situation. The sweet girl on the phone was so understanding. She said they'd had similar situations before, and while they couldn't refund the deposit, they could modify the reservation. Instead of a family reunion, this was going to be something else entirely. I spent that morning making phone calls. First, I called Margaret, the friend who had told me about Eden Bay in the first place. "Margaret," I said, "how would you like to go on the vacation of a lifetime?" Then I called June Henderson, who lived 2 streets over and had been widowed about the same time I was. June had been having a particularly hard time lately. Her arthritis was acting up, and her children rarely visited. Next was Evelyn Martinez from church. Evelyn had been the choir director for 30 years before she retired, and she had the most beautiful singing voice you ever heard. But she'd been so quiet lately, ever since her husband went into the nursing home. I called Shirley Thompson, who had taught Sunday school with me for 15 years. Shirley had never married, had devoted her whole life to teaching in the church, and I don't think she'd ever taken a real vacation in her life. Then there was Clara Williams, who ran the church food pantry and spent her days making sure everyone else had what they needed, never thinking about herself. And finally, Joanne Parker, whose husband had left her after 40 years of marriage, leaving her to rebuild her life at 70. "Ladies," I told each of them, "pack your bags. We're going to Eden Bay." You should have heard the excitement in their voices. Margaret actually cried. June asked me 3 times if I was serious. Evelyn started humming hymns right there on the phone. These women, these beautiful, faithful women who had been overlooked and undervalued by their families, were going to experience something wonderful. The week before our trip, we all met at my house to plan. We spread maps out on my kitchen table, looked at pictures of Eden Bay on my old computer, and planned our days like generals preparing for the most joyful battle of their lives. We decided we'd take turns cooking dinner, we'd have devotions together each morning, and we'd spend our days exploring God's creation in that beautiful place. The night before we left, I sat alone in my kitchen one more time. Samuel's picture was still there on the windowsill, next to that mason jar that had made this whole adventure possible. But instead of feeling sad, I felt grateful. "Thank you, Sam," I whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when you need them most." The drive to Eden Bay took about 4 hours. Margaret rode with me, and we followed a little caravan of cars carrying the other ladies. We sang hymns, told stories, and laughed until our sides hurt. By the time we arrived at the cottage, I felt lighter than I had in years. And oh, my dear, Eden Bay was everything I had dreamed it would be and more. The cottage was perfect, a big, rambling place with rocking chairs on the porch and windows that looked right out onto the ocean. We could hear the waves from every room, a constant reminder of God's power and majesty. That first evening, we all gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Evelyn had brought her guitar, and she led us in "How Great Thou Art" as the sky turned pink and gold over the water. June reached over and took my hand, and before I knew it, we were all holding hands, swaying gently as we sang. I looked around at these beautiful faces, these women who had known loss and disappointment but were still capable of such joy. And I realized that this was what I had been praying for all along. Not a specific group of people, but this feeling, this sense of being surrounded by love and faith and gratitude. We spent 7 glorious days at Eden Bay. Every morning we'd gather on the porch for coffee and devotions. Clara had brought her worn Bible, and we'd take turns reading passages that spoke to us. We talked about our lives, our losses, our hopes, and our faith. We shared stories we'd never told anyone else about dreams deferred, about children who had forgotten to call, about loneliness that cut so deep it felt like a physical pain. But we also laughed. Oh, how we laughed. Shirley told us about the time she accidentally dyed her hair green trying to cover the gray. June shared stories from her nursing days that had us in stitches. Margaret did impressions of the different pastors we'd had over the years that were so spot-on, we nearly fell off our chairs. We took long walks on the beach, collecting shells and sea glass like children. Evelyn found a piece of driftwood that looked like a cross, and we decided it was a sign. We built sandcastles. Can you imagine? 6 women in their 70s building sandcastles. And took pictures of ourselves covered in sand and laughing like schoolgirls. In the evenings, we'd cook dinner together. Everyone contributed something. Margaret's famous cornbread, June's seafood casserole, Evelyn's tres leches cake. We'd sit around that big dining table, say grace, and feast like queens. After dinner, we'd move back to the porch and talk until the stars came out. One evening, Joanne asked me if I was disappointed that my original family vacation hadn't worked out. I thought about it for a long moment, listening to the waves crash against the shore, feeling the warm night air on my skin, surrounded by these women who had become so dear to me. You know, I said, I spent 3 years planning a vacation for my family. But God had a different plan. He gave me a vacation with my real family, the family He chose for me. On our last night, we decided to have a little ceremony on the beach. Each of us brought something to release into the ocean: old hurts, regrets, disappointments we'd been carrying around like stones in our pockets. Clara brought a letter she'd written to her son, who hadn't spoken to her in 5 years over some silly argument she couldn't even remember the details of. Margaret brought a photo of her late husband at his sickest, saying she wanted to remember him healthy and strong. I brought a small piece of paper with David's text message written on it. We stood in a circle in the sand, the moonlight reflecting off the water, and took turns releasing our burdens to the sea. When it was my turn, I held that piece of paper up to the light and read it one more time. Then I looked at these incredible women standing around me, and I realized that David had been wrong about one thing. I didn't need to rest, I needed to live. I tore that paper into tiny pieces and threw them into the waves. I forgive you, I said, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to David, to Emma, or to myself. And I thank you for showing me where I really belong. When we got back home, something had changed in all of us. We started meeting every Tuesday afternoon at my house for tea and Bible study. We called ourselves the Eden Bay Sisters, and we made a pact to take a trip together every year. Margaret's daughter noticed how happy her mother seemed and asked what had happened. June's arthritis seemed better, or maybe she just complained about it less. Evelyn started singing solos in church again. As for me, I finally understood what Jesus meant when He said that sometimes we have to lose our life to find it. I had lost the family I thought I wanted, but I had found the family I needed. These women saw my worth, appreciated my love, and treasured the time we spent together. They didn't see my care as a burden or my affection as something to be managed. Did it still hurt that David and Emma had rejected my gift? Of course it did. I'm human, and I loved them. But I refused to let their inability to see value in what I offered diminish the joy I found in giving it to people who could. About 3 months after our trip, David called me. He said they'd had a wonderful time at Eden Bay and thanked me again for making it possible. He asked if I wanted to see pictures, and I said yes, of course I did. They looked happy in those pictures, and I was genuinely glad for them. But I also realized that I no longer needed their happiness to complete my own. Mom, he said, as we were looking through the photos on his phone, Emma was saying maybe next year we could all go together, you know, like you originally planned. I looked at my son, this man I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and felt something I'd never felt before, complete freedom from the need for his approval. That's sweet of you to offer, honey, I said, but I already have plans for next year. The Eden Bay Sisters are thinking about exploring the Oregon coast. He looked confused. The Eden Bay Sisters, my friends from church. We had such a wonderful time together that we decided to make it an annual tradition. I could see him trying to process this, trying to understand how his mother had built a whole life and community that didn't revolve around him and his family. And you know what? That was okay. It was healthy. It was how it should have been all along. The truth is, Dear Ty had spent so many years being the kind of mother and grandmother who was always available, always giving, always putting everyone else's needs first, that I had forgotten I was also Helen, a woman with dreams and friendships, and a calling that went beyond caring for people who took that care for granted. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love my family. I still pray for them every night, still send birthday cards and Christmas presents, still babysit when they need me to. But I no longer make their approval the center of my universe. I have my own universe now, one filled with Tuesday afternoon Bible studies, annual vacations with women who treasure my company, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing your worth doesn't depend on other people recognizing it. Last summer, the Eden Bay sisters and I went to the Blue Ridge Mountains. This year, we're planning a trip to Yellowstone. We've started calling ourselves traveling evangelists, spreading joy and friendship wherever we go. Hotel clerks remember us, restaurant servers look forward to seeing us, and other travelers often comment on how much fun we seem to be having. But the best part isn't the places we go. It's the way we take care of each other. When June had her hip surgery last year, we all took turns bringing her meals and keeping her company. When Evelyn's husband passed away, we surrounded her with love and support. When Margaret's grandson got married, we all helped her pick out her dress and celebrated with her like it was our own family. This is what family really means. People who choose to love you, who see your value, who celebrate your joys and share your sorrows. It's not about blood or obligation. It's about mutual respect and genuine affection and the decision to keep showing up for each other. I learned something else too. All those years I spent saving and sacrificing for a dream that was really about bringing my family together. I was missing the fact that God was already bringing my real family together. They were sitting next to me in church every Sunday, bringing casseroles when I was sick, asking about my day, and actually listening to the answer. I just hadn't recognized them as family, because I was so focused on the family I thought I was supposed to have. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if David and Emma had welcomed my invitation with joy. Would I have ever discovered the Eden Bay sisters? Would I have ever learned that my worth wasn't tied to their appreciation? Would I have ever experienced the particular joy that comes from being valued by people who choose your company rather than endure it out of obligation? I'll never know, and that's okay. What I do know is that God has a way of turning our disappointments into discoveries, our rejections into redirections. What felt like the end of my family dream was actually the beginning of my real family story. These days, when young mothers at church ask me for advice about raising children, I tell them this: love them with everything you have, teach them well, and prepare them to build their own lives. But remember that you are more than just a mother. You are a whole person with gifts and dreams and a calling that extends beyond your children. Nurture those parts of yourself too, because someday you'll need them. When I look back at that Tuesday morning when I read David's text message, I see it differently now. It wasn't the day my heart broke. It was the day my heart broke open, making room for more love than I ever thought possible. It was the day I stopped trying to force people to appreciate my gifts and started giving them to people who treasured them. The Eden Bay sisters and I are planning our 5th annual trip now. We're thinking about New England this time. We want to see the fall foliage and visit some historic churches. Margaret found a cottage in Vermont that looks perfect, and June is already researching the best restaurants in the area. Evelyn is putting together a playlist of songs we can sing on the drive, and Clara is collecting information about local attractions. And me, I'm sitting here with my new mason jar, this one labeled Adventure Fund, dropping in my spare change, and my tutoring money, and feeling grateful for every penny. Not because I'm saving for something I might not get, but because I'm saving for something I know will be wonderful, with people who will appreciate every moment of it. You see, dear, the most important thing I learned from all of this is that love is never wasted, even when it's not received the way we hoped. The love I poured into that original vacation plan, the sacrifice I made, the dreams I nurtured, none of that was lost. It just found a different destination, a place where it could flourish and multiply and come back to me tenfold. Every morning when I wake up, I still thank God for my family. But now my definition of family is much bigger and much more beautiful than it used to be. It includes the women who sit with me on Tuesday afternoons, studying scripture and sharing stories. It includes the people who choose to walk alongside me, not because they have to, but because they want to. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I talk to Samuel about it. I tell him about our adventures, about the laughter that fills my days, about the peace that comes from knowing you're loved for who you are, not what you can do for someone else. I think he'd be proud of the woman I've become, not in spite of disappointment, but because of how I chose to respond to it. So if you're listening to this and thinking about someone in your life who has been overlooked or undervalued, maybe it's time to reach out. And if you're someone who feels forgotten or taken for granted, maybe it's time to look around and see who else might be feeling the same way. There's a whole world of people out there waiting to be discovered, waiting to become family in the truest sense of the word. The Eden Bay sisters taught me that the best families aren't always the ones you're born into. Sometimes they're the ones you choose, or better yet, the ones God chooses for you when you finally stop trying so hard to make the wrong relationships work, and open your heart to the right ones. My prayer now is different than it used to be. Instead of asking God to keep my family together, I thank Him for showing me what family really means. And instead of asking for a sacred moment to share, I recognize that every moment with people who truly love you is sacred. That's my story, dear, not about losing a family, but about finding one. Not about a dream that died, but about a dream that transformed into something more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. Sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in disappointment, and sometimes the most profound blessings begin with what feels like loss. The mason jar on my windowsill is filling up again, and my heart is fuller than it's ever been. And if that's not a miracle worth sharing, I don't know what is.